My wife is a police officer. No one's heard from her since she went in. Is there any word yet?
I have this story I tell a lot. Lots of people have a similar story, and everyone saw my story on TV to one extent or another. If you lived or worked in New York City in September of 2001, you've been asked to talk about it a lot too. This is just one person's story. Individual experiences get lost in the spectacle and the chaos of the towers coming down. This thing happened to me on the way to work back then. The story starts there anyway. Most people stop at the point of getting home, maybe getting late. When I tell it, it goes on longer, up to a week and change later when we all went back to work in the post-apocalyptic financial district.
We're still living the aftermath.
But now we have the benefit of hindsight.
As I was saying, this thing happened to me on the way to work. Happened to a lot of people, actually. Some more than others. All things considered, I'm one of the lucky ones.
Is it true?
So what
Are
happened?
you really there?
I worked rather, in the financial district in New York City. People don't necessarily realize that a lot of the grunt work of Wall Street is done by artists of some kind. At the time, I was one of those. An actor and a writer by night, and a corporate grunt by day. Big business supports the arts in more ways than you realize. Sometimes the receptionist you see preoccupied with work is doing something far out of the realm of the corporate world. Every morning, I would wake up way too early and take the A train to Chambers Street under the World Trade Center. Then get out and walk a few blocks to work, where the investment banking industry would give me a new appreciation for Kafka. On September 11th, 2001, I overslept a little.
A little?
Okay, so I was late to work again. Nothing worthwhile ever got done in the first hour or so anyway. So there was this rumble in the subway.
Hey buddy, you hear something?
What are you, a tourist? This is the subway. How are you going to tell one rumble apart from any other?
I thought nothing of it. Sometimes I think I remember it only in retrospect. I got out of the train and took the stairs up a level. In that station, that meant I was still underground, where the A and the C and the 1 and the 9 trains all met, not far from where the E terminated. The newsstand that supplied my morning candy was not far, near the entrance to the mall that was directly under the towers. As I went through the turnstiles, I saw a crowd of people running toward me. There's a very specific kind of fear that comes from a screaming mass of people headed right at you. But that was only the beginning.
Ren, get out of here! What happened? A plane just crashed into the World Trade Center. People were running everywhere. It was chaotic. I heard the words plane crash and thought some idiot in a single propeller plane tried to pull a stunt. It was going to make me even later to where I already was. In the chaos of the station, I didn't know whether I was safer going up to the streets or down to the trains. Hey buddy, you better move on. I went to the lady in the token booth to find out what was happening, and if I should head up or down. What's going on?
Go back down. Get out of here.
That woman may have saved my life, because until I spoke to her, I was going to head for the streets. I would have been right under the towers. I hope she got out herself while there was still time. I got into an uptown train, being that it was still rush hour, trains were easy to come by. At that point, subways weren't affected yet. When I asked the conductor what was going on, he didn't know.
I heard something about a plane crash, but that was from you guys. If it doesn't affect us, we don't hear anything.
Do you know how bad it is?
Hey, like I said, all I know from you guys. If something just happened now, I won't know anything till they review us, and that's only if it affects us.
I took it one stop up down to Canal Street and got out just east of Broadway. At the staircase where I got out onto the street, my view of the towers was blocked by a building. I was clued in that the situation was far more serious than I had originally thought by the clouds of black smoke overhead. When I turned the corner onto Broadway and saw both towers in flames, I was in disbelief. What happened?
I don't know, man. They said a plane hit.
Did you see it?
No, I just got out of the subway.
How did one plane do that to both towers?
Someone said it was 2 planes.
No way, two planes messed up that bad.
I don't think it was an accident. I think it's terrorists. It's gotta be.
When did the second plane hit?
Maybe there was no second plane. Look at it. Maybe the plane hit and spun off and hit the next building.
I'm no expert, but I don't think planes do that.
At this point, you have to realize that I was still trying to get to work. You also have to realize that we in the streets knew less of what was going on than the people at home watching on TV. Part of me knew that things were really bad, but it hadn't hit me that I was watching a whole lot of people die until later. I just kept looking at the towers and trying to get downtown. I was going against most of the foot traffic. Most people who were in the streets were either staying where they were or heading uptown. Most people going towards the towers had uniforms on. Cops, people in FBI jackets, and a couple uniforms I hadn't seen before. There were lines a dozen people long at all the payphones. Hey, any luck with that thing?
Would I be on this line with you if I had any luck?
After a couple dozen tries, I managed to get through to my family's answering machine. Mom, whatever you're seeing on TV, I'm safe, I'm okay, and I'm on the way to work. I'm safe, I'm okay, and I'm on the way to work. I kept going down Broadway. The sidewalks were crowded, but like I said, more people were heading uptown or standing still than going my way. The streets themselves were a steady stream of cop cars, ambulances, and these things that looked like spaceships on wheels. Mobile command centers, I think they're called. At this point, I could see things falling from the towers. I didn't know what they were. I thought it was some kind of debris. I heard later about the people throwing themselves from burning floors. I try not to think about that now, even though the little falling specks play through my mind a lot. I kept trying to get further downtown. I tried reaching work on my cell to tell them I was running late for obvious reasons. The cell, of course, was worthless. I started to have my doubts. People on the streets were talking to each other in an almost friendly way. This is looking pretty bad.
Yeah, but you gotta give respect to architects, because some buildings are still standing.
They should have learned when they tried to take it down years ago that it wasn't coming down.
That's right, we build them strong here. But all those people, that's just wrong. How'd the pilots screw up that bad?
I heard it was 2 planes.
It's terrorists. It has to be. How do you know? I'm Israeli.
That's right, you people are used to this.
No, you never get used to it. At that moment, no one in the street had any clue the buildings would come down.
I wonder how long that'll take to fix.
At least a couple of years. What a shame. All them people.
We were in for a rude awakening. A couple things I saw made me reconsider my walk downtown. A woman walked by me like a zombie, tracks of dry tears on her cheeks and her face ablamed. Another one was sobbing uncontrollably, being guided by a friend. All the people with the cameras took me aback, but these days, that sort of thing is expected. What I was seeing was slowly beginning to hit me. Not because of the spectacle of the burning towers, but because of the few people in tears I saw walk by, whose stories I didn't know, but whose reactions I felt as they passed by me. I started to whisper the Kaddish as I kept looking at the buildings. For those who don't know, that's the Jewish prayer for the dead. In terms of religious law, I'm not sure that was technically the right response, but I'm not a religious person. It somehow seemed the only response that fit. I started to make my way uptown.
That's an act of war. Whoever did this, we're at war now.
But at war with who?
As I got further north, every now and then there would be someone with a radio and a cluster of people around them. We heard about the Pentagon, we heard about the planes crashing in Pennsylvania, and we wondered what more to expect that day.
Oh my God.
I heard that and the things that were crashing down, and every head in my view turned face the towers, or one of them rather. I spun around to see a sight that's going to stay with me a long time. The 2 towers fell in very different ways. The first, from where I saw it happen, exploded out from the corners, floor by floor, and then folded in on itself once the corners were there to support it. You have to understand the scale of these things to understand what I saw. From where I was, the tower seemed to take up almost my whole field of vision. It was big enough that though each floor exploded and burst up fast, the whole thing took some time to come down. From the street, you could still see it happen piece by piece. I was good enough distance away that I could see the huge clouds of dust and debris swallowing up everything they passed, but far enough away to be a bystander.
I saw one man around my age collapse before the tower had fallen.
I saw people frozen in disbelief at the middle of the street.
There was an old man in a business suit, very dignified, very serious, marching uptown on Green Street and shouting orders.
Go home! Get out of here! Don't stay here! Go home!
That man woke a lot of people up. My walk uptown took on some urgency, as did those of the people around me. Not panic, but urgency. New Yorkers do not stampede.
That's it. No more Twin Towers. There's just one now. My kids are going to ask me what it was like too.
This is horrible, but this is history. This is like being at Pearl Harbor.
As I got further uptown, closer to NYU, I stopped to listen to the radio of a Jeep that was parked along the street. There was a man in his late 20s or early 30s, standing at the open door, looking at the remaining tower with binoculars. Can I borrow your binoculars?
Here you go, buddy.
What I saw was that the flames had gotten bigger and were spreading further. I was lucky in that by then I wasn't going to see people throwing themselves from the windows anymore, and would not have to learn about that till later. I watched a helicopter come close to the tower, hoping to see it spray something that would put out the fires, hoping the fires wouldn't spread any more than they already did, and praying against all logic that I wouldn't have to see this tower come down too. You think it'll stay up?
I hope so, man. Shame. Such a shame. All them women. All of them. Beautiful women that I'm never gonna meet now. Such a shame.
I walked up through Soho to NYU. There were crowds of students mixed in with the business people now. And though we could still see the one remaining tower and the growing flames, we bystanders didn't feel as much in harm's way anymore.
That changed fast.
There was still one tower up, Tower 1, the one with the antenna. It had been hit close to the top, it still stood, but you could see the flames getting higher and larger, even from a few miles away, just north of Houston Street.
We thought that since the hole seemed to cover less area, the tower might weather the damage. Little did we know.
I was facing away from the tower. You could only stand and stare so much at once. I had my cell phone on again. Maybe my mother was home. Maybe she'd be there to get the call this time. I dialed. There was the pause I was already familiar with when the phone tried to connect and was most likely going to fail. This time though, instead of a quiet beep that signals a call failure, I got a loud, high-pitched feedback sound. I heard screaming all around me, and all anyone would look at was right behind me.
Oh God, not the other one.
No.
I said before that both towers fell in very different ways. I turned around and see the second one fall.
From where we were standing, it was like dominoes falling downwards.
Starting from the top, a floor would collapse onto the floor underneath it, which would combine to collapse a story lower and so on.
There was this horrible rumbling sound and a cloud of debris that expanded outward as it followed the collapse of the tower downwards. Unlike the first tower, I didn't see this one go all the way down. I was spared that sight by the buildings in my immediate view.
But just like the first one, when something that big comes down, it doesn't happen instantly. We had to watch it happen, piece by piece, until the other buildings blocked our view.
A woman turned to me and told her story. She had to talk. She was very pale and seemed like she would need to tell everyone who would listen what happened to her. Later on, I would be the same way. In a way, I'm doing that now.
All my neighbors are still under there. I live near there. Everyone in my building was watching it happen from the roof. I told them that it wasn't safe, that they should get away. They said I was crazy. They're all still there. Oh God, they're all still there. Don't worry, lady. I'm sure they got evacuated. Oh God, I hope so. I don't believe they stayed. When I got to the street, I just ran. I didn't slow down until a few blocks away, and then the other one came down. I was running, and I saw this kid. Sorry to meet anyone in their 20s as a kid. And I don't know if you know this about people in suits, but when they eat, they throw their ties over their shoulders. Well, he was throwing up, and his tie was about to slip down his shoulder. I pulled the tie back and put my arm around him, and well, he finished. And he got up and put his arm around me, and I said, "Are you okay?" And he said, "Yeah, are you okay?" And I said, "Yes." And then we both started running again. But everyone in my building was still on the roof. They were watching it burn. I'm sure everyone got out safe. Let's get you somewhere inside. You're in shock.
Do you really think they all got out?
I hope so, kid. I hope so.
I heard later about how everyone in the area was evacuated by the police and fire departments. I was glad to know that girl was right, whether she knew it at the time or not. I fell in momentarily with an older businesswoman and a student.
Hey, buddy, I'll give you $5 if you let me use that cell phone to call my wife.
If this thing worked, I'd give it to you and not even think about taking your money. You're welcome to try it. I've been trying to call home since this all started.
I've got to get through to my wife. She hasn't heard from me since before we were evacuated.
I think she'd try to get to a landline.
Listen, I live in the dorms right here. You guys can come in and use the phone if you want.
Thank you so much.
I've only been in New York for 3 weeks. We don't get this sort of thing at home.
We normally don't get this sort of thing in New York either. Where are you from?
New Orleans? Were you guys close?
I was a couple blocks away.
I was in the subway station underneath.
Well, I'm glad you guys are okay at least. Come with me. I've got a phone and there's a big TV in the lounge. We can find out what's going on.
We started to follow her into a building. There was this huge crowd around the TV.
In an apparent terrorist attack, both World Trade Centers have been destroyed, and the Pentagon is now on fire.
I watched for a while. The hallway was mostly filled with students, though a few people seemed out of place in a crowd of college kids. I was hoping the TV would tell me something I didn't already know, but nothing on the TV was either comforting or useful. Eventually, I was separated from my group. I realized that I still had to go get to a phone. I walked to the arts building. There was a lounge on the first floor. Contingency plans had already been put in place, apparently. There was a big TV monitor surrounded by students. The cafe in the lounge had a sign up that student affairs were picking up the tab for coffee, tea, and water.
There were about as many of us in the lounge as on Broadway in front of the Teach building. The view from the TV was a variation of the view from Broadway. On TV, you could see the disaster from cameras. On Broadway, you could see a pillar of smoke rising from a few short miles away.
Some professors tried to continue teaching class as though nothing had happened. But eventually, everyone realized that something big was up, and we all were trying to find out what was going on.
My dorm was on Water Street, not far from Ground Zero. Pretty soon, I was going to get the news that I was going to be homeless for a while.
I didn't think to call my family in California until much later when I got home and there were a ton of messages on the machine. I hadn't been anywhere near it, so I didn't think anyone would be that worried. Of course, this was before the paranoia and bomb scares of the next few days and weeks.
At this point, all we were trying to do was find out what was going on. We still couldn't grasp that what was happening, only a few miles away.
Not seeing anyone I knew in the lounge, I took the elevator to a mostly empty office.
Can I help you? Hi, I'm an alumni. I was at the towers when they were being hit. I just want to use the phone. Come here, use this line. Do you need anything else?
Are you alright? Were you really close?
I'm about as alright as I can expect to be. Thanks so much. I was in the subway underneath as it was happening. I couldn't get above ground. Probably lucky. I went uptown one stop and got out and saw it all from the street. Thank God you're okay. They were wonderful to me. I realized then that I had this unbelievable need to tell people I was there, to talk about what I saw. The landlines were worthless, too. All phones were still dead, though, to my surprise, I could access the internet. There were already emails from friends around the country making sure I was alive.
You'd better be okay. Call me a problem now.
Please check in. I'm watching the news and I know you work around there. I just want to know you're alive.
I emailed everyone I could think of. I was there. I am alive. I am shaken up, but I am okay. I emailed some of my coworkers who do not share my habit of sleeping in and would have been only a few blocks away at the office. It wasn't until I got to see them a few days later I would hear their stories. I was at that office for almost an hour. I got some messages back right away. One of my close friends came as I was growing restless.
I'm at the arts building in the university, in the studio on the 3rd floor. Come see me. So good to see you. How's your family? Are they all okay?
I left a phone message when both towers were still up. I've been trying to call, but I can't get through. And they didn't answer my email. I emailed a friend in D.C. who was trying to call them for me. I don't know if he got through yet.
Come to the studio. We have food and coffee, and there are a bunch of computers. You can try to reach everyone from there.
How about you? Is everyone accounted for?
My friends who temp downtown emailed me that they're okay. Everyone else would have been far away.
It was so unbelievably good to see a friend. The kindness of strangers is one thing, but in a crisis, you want the people who are close to you to be there. I spent most of the afternoon in the design studio at New York University. It felt calm and quiet and safe compared to the streets. I had coffee and water and an internet connection to follow the news and keep in touch with the rest of the world. I exchanged emails with everyone I could reach and read the news as it was coming in. I got in touch with my family. Everyone was accounted for. My father was supposed to be flying back from a business trip that day. It was a big relief to know that his plane was grounded. Later, I would hear some scary stories. I'd hear about near-death experiences. But then and there, I knew the people that were close to me were safe. It wasn't till the middle of the afternoon that we left.
When was the last time you ate?
You know, with all this going on, I forgot I was even hungry. I didn't even have breakfast.
Let's go then.
While we were eating, someone managed to get through to me on my cell phone. Oh, thank God you're alive. You scared the hell out of me. I was so worried that you were trapped underneath. Are you okay? Well, obviously I'm unemployed, but otherwise I'm okay. Unemployed? Yes. How can you joke?
I'm joking because I'm still alive, though I really am pretty sure I watched my jaw blow up a few hours ago. The next few days, I got a lot of calls like that. There were other worries besides my job. I had deposited my last check in a bank machine on the ground floor of the World Trade Center after business hours the day before. That was something that was going to need to be dealt with later on as well. At the moment, all I could think about was the food in front of me.
I'm supposed to go meet my boyfriend up at a friend's house in Hell's Kitchen. You should come with me if you don't have anywhere to go. Maybe we can try to get blood on the way up.
No one would have our blood. All the blood banks were filled to capacity within hours of being opened up. It would be like that for weeks.
We walked uptown 50 blocks. The streets were empty of cars. This does not happen in New York. There were police everywhere, and I was glad to see them. Behind us, there was still that huge pillar of smoke. We spent most of the afternoon with our friends, and my phone started working again. It took me 5 minutes to hear all the messages, and I almost wore out the battery answering them all. One was from a friend who did not want to spend the night alone. She worked in a hospital uptown and spent the whole day waiting for victims that never came. I didn't want to be alone either. I decided to stop at my place to shower and change before heading back down to the island to see my friend. Phone service was slowly returning, and my cell rang a few more times throughout the day. More calls like the last one, making sure I was alive, seeing if I was okay, wanting to hear what I saw. It was evening by the time I got into the subway on Columbus Circle, almost halfway up the island from where I had originally gotten up under the towers. The gates were open, free rides for all. It wasn't crowded, but there were people everywhere, all very quiet and somber. There was a fireman in the subway in full gear, covered with dust and looking unbelievably tired. It was obvious where he had been. I wanted to come up and shake his hand, thank him for his work, for his bravery, but something in his face at that moment said that he just wanted to be left alone.
The next day, the streets were still empty of cars.
You couldn't get milk in the grocery store because no trucks could cross the bridges.
Of course, there are no cows in Manhattan.
I'm sure you remember the front pages of all the newspapers.
They look a lot like what we saw from the streets.
No one could talk about anything else.
Lots of businesses were closed.
There was a long, long line outside Red Cross headquarters.
Again, you had to wake up early to give blood. And if you wanted to volunteer, forget about it. They were turning doctors away. Doctors.
Most of us couldn't do much the next day. I woke up in my friend's apartment. She was already working at the hospital by then. I went to the Red Cross, was told they had as much blood as it could take that day, and filled out a volunteer form. From uptown, you couldn't see the smoke, though for weeks there would be a pillar of smoke marking where the towers used to be. On my way home, there were already pictures of the missing, hanging in every public place. Those pictures would be there for a while. Many places were shrines in memory of those who were lost. Eventually, they got taken down, though in a few places they were up for months. I got home early in the afternoon and gave in to the exhaustion of the day before. I slept till late the next morning. It didn't even occur to me to check in at work. Everything below 14th Street was sealed off. I stayed uptown in Washington Heights most of the next day. Everywhere I went, all anyone could talk about was the towers. I lived far enough uptown that I couldn't see the smoke, but the images of the day before were still playing through my mind. And then there were the bomb scares that kept happening. None where I lived, but they kept coming through on the radio and the internet.
There was one at Empire State Building almost right away, and that became a regular occurrence. Rockefeller Center, too.
General paranoia was high. There was a fake Nostradamus prediction circulating about the next great war and the twin brothers falling and the great city in flames.
Ooh, spooky.
You want to hear spooky? I read the Nostradamus. It says you owe me money.
You'll get nothing from me.
In all seriousness, though, I jumped at every siren I heard.
In New York, you hear a lot of sirens. If you jumped at everyone, you must have had plenty of exercise.
How about you when you heard a plane over a weekend? When you heard a plane overhead a week later?
Let's not talk about that. You know, this would all be easier if there was something we could do.
Towards the evening on the 14th, I received a very welcome call from an old friend.
Hey, you still want to get on a volunteer crew?
He worked for the Red Cross. All their employees were drafted to work on the relief crews. Volunteer positions were hard to come by. Fortunately, the supply of volunteers was unbelievably high in proportion to the jobs available, even for the people with specialized skills.
We spent the entire night below the 14th Street line.
Going downtown in the middle of the night on September 14, 2001 was a quick drive. There was still no traffic.
But once we got downtown, there were still layers and layers of security barricades. Though, of course, no one was going to stop a Red Cross vehicle.
The owner of a couple of Starbucks had donated lots of time and coffee in the cause. The canisters were going to be distributed to rescue workers.
The kid in the coffee shop said that she would brew her ass off for us.
We made coffee until about 5 a.m.
Just doing something, anything to help made us feel so much better.
At maybe 3 a.m., a woman walked up to the coffee shop with a poster.
Hey, I'm looking for my partner. Can I put up a flyer here?
Sure.
Thanks. Buddy, listen. If you see him, call the number. We're really worried.
Much of the city was wallpapered with posters like that. Walls and walls of missing people. Many walls had candles and flowers as well. When the truck was full, there was a murmur among my crew about wanting to see Ground Zero. What do you want to see that for? It's off limits anyway.
I need to see it, or at least try to.
Me too. I say we go for it. I was there. I saw them fall. I want to see.
The worst that can happen is we get turned away.
Okay, but for the record, I'm against this. On the drive down, I noticed a box of teddy bears and stuffed dogs in the trunk. Who are we feeding the teddy bears to? Or are these for the kids?
They're for the people in the shelters, kids and adults. If you just had your home blown up, you'd take whatever you can get.
The little stuffed dogs didn't look quite as silly to me after that. The closer we got to Ground Zero, the more it just started to look like a demilitarized zone. Once we got below 14th Street, it was just police, lots of police, and police from all over the country. But now there were soldiers mixed in with the police, and military vehicles, and the closer we got to the place itself, the more we knew we were beyond civilian territory.
We got really close, almost to the gates.
There was this massive pillar of smoke, and that smell that we were all learning to get used to, and trying not to get used to got stronger. Sort of sour, like burnt concrete with something else mixed in that you didn't want to think about.
We were able to see debris and the remains of the lower walls of the towers through the smoke.
We were stopped by a police officer near the gates.
What are you doing here?
Delivering coffee. Would you like some? Fresh brewed?
You can pull in over there with the other support crews.
We drove by the other crews, made inquiries, and found that there was no shortage of coffee at that part of Ground Zero at the moment. We headed back to the Red Cross to deliver our 80-plus canisters of fresh coffee for redistribution. The crew I was working with was dissolved, and I got home at about 8 a.m. Later that week, I got a call from my employer. All the niceties of the situation were observed. That is, verification that I was in one piece physically and emotionally, and seeing if I had lost anyone in the attack. None of these niceties were not heartfelt, but the state of the city was that it was just good manners at the time to check vital signs. It seems Wall Street was to reopen that coming Monday. The day arrived, and I got ready to return to work. It seems I was to be closer to the aftermath than I thought. When the train reached the empty Chambers Street World Trade Center station, where my story began, it passed through slowly and without stopping. Everyone on the train became very quiet, and we all passed through in silence. There were two kinds of uniforms all over the financial district when I got there on the morning of the 18th. One army was in camouflage, and the other was in corporate casual.
There was a somber and determined mood in most offices.
A lot of stories from the week before were exchanged.
We were only a few blocks away. We found out via the intercom, then stopped working and saw the whole thing on television in the company cafeteria.
Not long after the buildings fell, we decided we couldn't stay. We wrapped handkerchiefs around our mouths so we could breathe.
I saw a new Mercedes abandoned on the street. It was completely covered with dust and debris. We walked home in shock, not even stopping to rest until we were in Midtown. My main office was in 1 Liberty. I couldn't go back to get my things. They were still worried that it might collapse.
1 Liberty would dominate the skyline for most cities. It's about half the size of one of the towers, which is saying a lot. Early on, you couldn't get anywhere near it. I remember spending most of September 10th there. Eventually, it was reopened.
Some people didn't come back to work that Monday. They said they would never be able to go to the Wall Street area again. A few that said that came back within a few days. Others moved out of New York.
Pictures of the missing were plastered everywhere.
It was heartbreaking. A lot of people went past hope into denial, still thinking they would hear from their loved ones.
There were also posters about ethnic violence. One thing that sticks out of my mind that just infuriates me as an American was a Sikh man standing at Penn Station, handing out flyers explaining his ethnicity. It's bad enough that they have to deal with bigotry, but the hate mongers should at least get their ethnicity straight. In America today, that should not be necessary. It's embarrassing. I apologize to him on behalf of the rest of the country.
What did he say?
He just smiled.
One vivid irony was the reveal of the situation between my friends and family here in Israel. Just this once, everyone over there was calling here to see that we had survived the terrorism rather than vice versa.
Some of us that came back to work started getting sick.
The phrase World Trade Center call has entered our vocabulary.
Think of going to work every day where not only are there unbelievable amounts of industrial waste in the air and fires still burning underground, but thousands of bodies decaying not far away.
Many people wore masks. There was that definite smell in the air that wouldn't go away for a while.
I could smell it in Brooklyn on Sundays, depending on the wind. I could also still see the smoke coming up for a long time after the fact.
Who knows what was in that smoke?
One day after coming back to work, I got dizzy.
You got pale too? Are you okay?
I think I need to go home.
She was back to work in a couple of days. There were a lot of things in the air, in different combinations every day. One day, it could randomly be the wrong combination for a body type, and then you could just drop. Some firemen working on Ground Zero ended up retiring not long after from being disabled from what they had inhaled. We all went back to work though. The best treatment for us all was to rebuild. Those who could, anyway. Some companies were hit hard. They stayed in business, but had to let most of their employees go.
I was one of them.
Me too.
People found ways to keep going, though. I, for one, am staying in New York. I lived through crime and pollution and ridiculous rents to be here. Damned if some terrorists are going to scare me away.
We still have the best pizza in the world, and I can never give going to the theater here.
And the hot dogs on the streets. You can't forget the hot dogs. Where else are you going to get hot dogs like that?
And the nightlife.
Still no place like it.
I'm staying.
I'm with you.
History came knocking really loud on everyone's door on September 11th. I had a close call. I still tell that story a lot.
I was there.
I got away.
I'm shaken up, but I'm okay. This is the flag of my country. I did not choose it. It was chosen for me by my parents not very long before I was born. I love my country. I have another country and another flag. But the beauty of being here is that there is no conflict of interest in me saying that. I had a really close call because some people take issue with what this flag stands for. Some men I never even met tried to kill me and throw my country into chaos. They didn't kill me.
They did kill a lot of other people.
Children saw things from the classroom windows that they should never have to see. Some of those kids are still waiting for a mommy, daddy, brother, and sister who's not ever going to come home.
I got home clean.
Other people lived, covered in dust and debris that would wash away far sooner than the shock and trauma.
Other people had closer calls than I did. I was just a bystander, really.
Not long after, some people were scared to leave their houses. Some people are so scared they're thinking of leaving New York.
I will not leave.
I will live my life.
I will rebuild. We will mourn the dead and heal the injured. We will have justice and we will have peace. The term "and justice for all" has implications that cannot be ignored here.
I hear you there.
I will not live in fear.
We will live our lives. We will rebuild. We will not live in fear.